Before we begin today's review, I would just like to mention that this product, as well as many of the new PNSO dinosaurs, can be found at Dan's Dinosaurs. Dan frequently offers incredible deals on new releases, as well as peace of mind when ordering items from outside the States. Be sure to check his store frequently for new merchandise, and if you should ever order from him, be sure to mention that Killershrewfan sent you in the comments box at checkout. It's a massive help to the growing channel, and I appreciate it. Now with that out of the way, let's get to the review. Hello everyone and welcome back to Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at PNSO's new Spinosaurus, Essien. Essien 2.0 is just one of a smattering of new PNSO figures that have been unleashed upon the community throughout the past few months after a relatively quiet year. This is the first of those new figures that I have acquired. I've ordered a couple more from AliExpress, but getting stuff from China is always a bit of a crapshoot, especially this time of year. It could come in a matter of weeks or take a couple of months, you just never know. So instead of going through AliExpress, I ended up getting this guy from Dan's Dinosaurs during one of his awesome pre-sale specials for a sweet $29.99. I'm so excited to open it up and take a look at it, so let's get to it. First, I gotta mention the packaging. I feel like PNSO's packaging is to dinosaur collectors what Apple packaging is to tech nerds. The presentation is so great, and I love it so much that I try to emulate the look in my reviews. The solid white background really emphasizes the image of the product within, and looks fantastic. You can see in the corner you've got the PNSO Prehistoric Line title in English on one side, and what I believe to be the Mandarin translation on the other side. Well, I guess the English side would be the actual translated side in reality, but either way you can see that Essien 2.0 here is number 35 out of the line. 35 out of how many? Well, with how PNSO is going, it's probably going to be 432 when all is said and done. Aside from that little blurb though, it's all just this beautiful glamour shot of the Spinosaurus looking absolutely fantastic. And if this isn't enough to make you just want to tear the box open as soon as you get your hands on it, then I don't know what would be. Me? I'm really trying to maintain long enough to at least discuss the packaging first, but trust me, it's not easy. The top of the box features another image of Essien from a different angle, along with the PNSO blurb once again, as well as the company's tagline of "Every life deserves respect." The bottom of the box features some general product information, nothing too interesting, yada yada yada. Okay, let's get to the unboxing, I can't wait any longer. And there is Essien finally released to my collection, and I gotta say, out of the box, this figure is incredible, absolutely staggering in both sculpt and presentation. There's been a lot of talk circulating about how some of PNSO models suffer greatly from promo images to final product, and whereas no, this one isn't as good as the glamour shot, most products never are, it still looks fantastic, and I cannot wait to give you guys a closer look at it. So let's do this! Taking a look at the head of Essien 2.0, you can see that this figure is chock full of detail. You've got scales of varying shapes and sizes that resemble the cracking skin of crocodile snouts covering the entire head. The eye is painted in a nice yellow color with a black pupil, and at first I thought it looked to be a bit high up on the face, but consulting some skeletals, it appears to be well placed, as is the vibrant red crest above the eyes there. The teeth are beautifully rendered, they're individually sculpted and look nice and sharp, and this model does feature an articulated jaw, the only piece in this scale range to do so to my knowledge, and it opens nice and smooth to a great yawning width. The throat is sculpted so far back in this thing, it really does look like a functioning gullet. Unfortunately, the painting on the cheek doesn't quite match up between the upper and lower parts of the jaw, which can be a bit distracting. That being said, this is one of those models that I think looks better with the mouth closed anyway, so no great loss there. One thing I will say about the overall shape of the head is that it feels a little droopy. I don't really know why. I get that vibe, but it doesn't look like the angle of the snout quite matches up with the angle the back of the neck feeds into the skull, which gives the snout a sort of downturned look. I don't know, maybe it's just me, and that's definitely a nitpick. But still, I really don't much care for this thing head on. It looks derpy as hell, and mine even came with some wear to it. You can see the yellow on the snout seems to have been rubbed away along with some of the detail there. I'm sure it's just luck of the draw, but that was kind of annoying to see when I opened it up, and it's something to check your models for. But those minor elements aside, I think this head sculpt is a bang-up representation of Spinosaurus, and the profile of it is amazing. Moving down the length of the body, I love how beefy the neck on this thing is, and the pelican throat looks awesome. So glad to finally see that properly realized on a Spinosaurus model. And the large rectangular scale details look phenomenal down there as they transition gorgeously into the smaller scales of the neck and main body. You can see that you've also got some osteoderm sprinkled across the sculpt, and all of the wrinkles, muscle tones, and scale details walk a great line of being subtle and immediately noticeable at a glance, which is awesome. As you hit the tail of the figure, you can see that amazing new Spinosaurus tail has been incredibly sculpted here, with larger crocodilian scales transitioning from the underside to the smaller scales, and even some indications of the fish-like vertebrae in the tail itself can be seen. I mean, gosh, the sculpt on this figure is just amazing, especially on a relatively smaller offering. Everything is so crisp and well rendered, and it really gives this little guy a lifelike look. Honestly, it's one of those figures that I feel like is about to start walking towards me as I sit here talking about it. It's that good. Moving along the underbelly, this is where you see some of those old Spinosaurus cliches showing through. The more rectangular scale work down here looks gorgeous, especially on top of all those lovely muscles and skin details. I mean, look at how they fold into themselves on the curve of the neck there. That's impeccable. But it does feel distinctly crocodilian in its presentation, which is a style PNSO have largely managed to avoid on the rest of the figure. Don't get me wrong, it looks beautiful. I mean, look at the skin folding up around the legs. That's awesome, and you can even see a subtle cloaca at the base of the tail there, and something I really like that they've sculpted in are two bulges at the trunk of the tail. This feels reminiscent of the tails of male bearded dragons. They have those two oblong bulges while females only have one. It's a subtle way to give this model a bit of sexual dimorphism that I'm sure a lot of people are going to miss, but it's great to see. It adds a whole new layer of physiology to this piece. But as I was saying, if you're a collector who's tired of seeing crocodilian aesthetics on their Spinosaurus models, then this area might be a bit of a turnoff to you. I personally quite enjoy it, but I can understand if people are tired with this style. Taking a look at the back of the Spinosaurus, another cliche we have is that the sail looks incredibly thin, and whereas I don't personally buy into the idea that the extended vertebrae support a hump of fat or anything like that, I think there's a fine line to be walked when sculpting the sail so that they still look like they form naturally from the body, rather than looking like they're just glued on strips of skin and flesh. But that's really only a problem if you look at this thing from the top, which I don't intend to do outside of this review, so let's move on, shall we? But speaking of the sail, from a side view, it is beautifully sculpted. The larger scales on the vertebra really help distinguish them from the rest of the sail, and those tightly packed scale details between them look amazing, to say the least. You can see that this is sculpted with the popular M shape, which is always more interesting to look at than the old half moon shape. The one thing I don't care for would be the little splotches of black that stain the sail. It looks like the start of a wash that they forgot to finish, but we're not talking about paint just yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. The back legs are fantastic and properly proportioned to the rest of the body. They're small but well muscled, with rippling thighs and flexing calves that move into those gracile ankles and small webbed feet. Yeah, if you look at them from the bottom, you can see there is some webbing between the toes there, and the fourth weight-bearing digit has been properly included as well. Now we gotta talk about the arms. First off, they're incredibly beefy and very well sculpted. The movement of the skin around the joints is very believable and lifelike, but I gotta say the real talking point about these things are those massive claws. I've never seen claws like this on a Spinosaurus, and frankly, I love it. It might seem a bit extreme for some people, but if you ask me, it's great to see a Spinosaurus with some proper keratin coverings on the claws. Another area of contention for some is the fact that there are more or less weight bearing in this sculpt, especially on the right side where it's braced on its knuckles. A lot of people are saying this is inaccurately depicting Essien 2.0 in a knuckle walking position. Honestly, I don't think that's necessarily the case, just as I don't think PNSO is suggesting Spinosaurus balanced on its claws with the other hand. It's just a point of contact on this sculpture to make sure that the figure can stand, nothing more. Also, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to suggest that Spinosaurus may have put weight on its knuckles from time to time, especially when standing from a resting position. But to be fair, I certainly wouldn't have minded seeing those claws extended outward rather than curled up, so, not a huge deal, but, you know. And while we're on the subject of the pose, you can see Essien 2.0 is sculpted in an undulating posture and appears to be stepping forward with his left leg while his back right leg braces. His neck is craned over his left shoulder, potentially eyeing a food source or rival as if something caught his attention while he was walking. The tail is swept back behind him and curls to the right while forming a fifth point of contact for the model. I gotta say, the extreme curl of the neck kinda makes this a difficult model to display, especially if you want to get that nice profile look, but what are you gonna do, you know? Overall, from a sculptural standpoint, I love this figure. I can't say it enough. The details are all phenomenal, and it captures the latest findings of Spinosaurus so incredibly well. It's what I've been waiting for since April when the new findings were published, and I'm so glad to finally have it. Really, I can't say any of my issues with this sculpt are major problems. They're just minor nitpicks in the grand scheme of how good this model looks. Now let's talk paint, another gorgeous aspect of the figure. You can see it's done in mainly golden yellow and tan tones on the main body that transition to a darker yellow as you move up the flanks. Then you have this sort of dark airbrushing along the back that branches off into these dark markings all across the animal and blend very smoothly with the rest of the coloration. The sail is more vibrantly colored with some orangish yellows and tans, and the brown markings can be found on here as well. A yellow line runs across the tip of the sail and tail. This is the only bit of the paint that feels kind of painted on. There's no like real transition or anything to it. It's just a solid band across the top, which kind of bugs me, but it's very small and hardly noticeable when you take this thing at a glance. And then, like I said, you've got a splash of red covering the crest on the head. All in all, this is a gorgeous and bold palette, beautifully applied in a naturalistic yet striking manner. It may not be as good as the glamour shot, but really I think all it's missing are some dark washes. The sail kinda has some splotches of dark colors between the scales, but that's it, which is kind of unfortunate, but that, like the banding on the back, is a small issue to say the least. As far as the size goes, this was another area of contention for a lot of people. For a straight measurement from the tip of the tail to the tip of the snout, the Spinosaurus comes in at around 9 inches long, or 23 centimeters, and stands in at a mere 4 inches, or roughly 10 centimeters, at the top of the sail. Many people were certainly bummed out to realize that this was one of the smallest offerings of Spinosaurus out there. And when you consider the price, it only made matters worse. But after doing a little poking around on the Dinosaur Toy Forum, it came to my attention that this model is indeed based off the roughly 11 meter or 36 foot long specimen FSAC-KK11888, the same specimen which the latest tail information came from. And if you were to measure this figure along the curve of its twisting body, it actually comes in at roughly 12 inches long. With that in mind, if my math is correct, then this figure would still roughly be in the popular 1/35th scale range for the specimen it represents. I don't think I'm alone in saying I would love to see a large-scale version of this sculpt, but if you're someone who only collects 1/35 scale, then fear not, this figure is actually pretty near the mark. And it is cool to see PNSO properly representing the specimen that led us to these latest findings, rather than just making another big Spinosaurus just because. Now for some size comparisons. First up, I'm going to go ahead and bring in last year's limited edition Spinosaurus from PNSO, which serendipitously turned out to be the first figure to somewhat feature the proper tail of Spinosaurus. Anyway, you can see that offering absolutely dwarfs this new Spinosaurus from PNSO. But if I'm being honest, I find the sculptural details as well as the paint to be far superior on Essien 2.0, and that's saying something because I'm one of those people who quite likes the PNSO Spinosaurus. Anyway, it would be nice to see PNSO making something a little more in line with PNSO's offering in terms of size, but I think they put in the work and made sure that this smaller offering could be just as mighty despite its small stature, which is nice to see. And while we're on the subject of PNSO, here it is next to the old JP3 style Spinosaurus from their early years, and say what you will about accuracy, I never get tired of seeing pop culture versions of dinosaurs compared to their real-life counterparts. And heck, while we're doing that, let's bring in the recently reviewed Nanmu Spinosaurus Supplanter, and this is fun for me because you've got two favorites. My favorite JP3 style Spinosaurus model compared to my new favorite real-life Spinosaurus model. You can see that Nanmu's offering towers over PNSO's, but again, Essien 2.0's bold colors ensures he won't get lost among your larger display pieces. Next, here it is with the old Carnegie Spinosaurus. I no longer have the 2019 Safari LTD Spinosaurus, which, now that I think about it, has a very similar color scheme to Essien here. But anyway, this is the best I could do for a Safari comparison since the new for 2021 figure isn't available yet. Again, this is a nice little past and present comparison to make. The Carnegie offering was accurate for its time, but look how far our image of Spinosaurus has come. If you ask me, it just gets cooler and cooler the more we learn about it. Alright, now for the comparison you all want to see. Here is Essien with Essien. I'm gonna have to give the new version a different name to cut back on some confusion. Drop your suggestions below, but you can see that last year's offering from PNSO is an absolute monster compared to this year's version. I mean, wow, that thing is huge! But if I'm being 100% honest, I was never in love with that figure. Don't get me wrong, the detail work is super impressive, but overall, I found it to be lanky and dully painted, with some very bizarre design elements, like a thumb. Seriously, there's a thumb. What the? My favorite aspect of it was easily the gorgeous base. And honestly, now that we've got this update, I might put old Essien in storage and leave his base for Essien 2.0 here, because like many Spinosaurus offerings, he looks great with that Onchoprestes. Is that what that thing's called? I always feel like I get that one wrong. Anyway, I would love to see Essien 2.0 in a size as big as old Essien, but between these two, there's amazingly little contest in regards to which figure is superior. Next up, I'm going to bring in some of PNSO's other smaller scale dinosaurs. First up, we've got Duke the Spinops, then we've got Bieber the Stegosaurus, and finally Seed the Ankylosaurus. Now, Duke was my first of the new PNSO figures last year, and I thought he was good, but not great. Then came Seed, and I was blown away by that figure. The sculpt and paint were among the best I had ever seen in the price range, and I had high hopes for what was to come from this line. Those hopes were somewhat deflated by Bieber, who is admittedly underwhelming, but I gotta say, after seeing Essien 2.0 here, my faith in PNSO and their midline range has been fully restored, and I cannot wait to get my hands on the rest. Here's hoping I haven't peaked early here. And of course, what would a Spinosaurus review video be without a Tyrannosaurus Rex showing up? Here is Essien 2.0 with the 2020 version of Wilson the Tyrannosaurus Rex, who absolutely towers over this Spinosaurus figure. Yeah, JP3 would have been a much different story if this is what we were working with, I gotta say, but even looking at these two side by side, that Wilson mold is quite old at this point, and I am seeing some massive improvements in style between the two. And that was my very long-winded review of the new for 2020 PNSO Spinosaurus Essien. I find that my longer reviews are either of figures that I love or hate, and that's because I find more to talk about on those kinds of pieces. This one easily falls under the category of models that I love. It is a beautifully sculpted and wonderfully painted update of a dinosaur that just gets more and more awesome in my eyes as time goes by. Really, the only issues I have with this model are either very nitpicky or probably really only a problem on my specific figure. Like I said, I can see some people being put off by the smaller size and perhaps the higher price tag, but honestly, it's so worth the money, and like I said, this actually falls pretty close in that standard 1/35th scale for the specimen it is representing, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Now, I would love to see PNSO create another sizable offering of Spinosaurus, but until they do, I honestly feel like this is the best representation of our latest understanding of this animal on the market. The only other versions that I think have been done so far are the GR Toys Spinosaurus and upcoming Safari LTD offering, and whereas I haven't reviewed either of those on the channel, I feel confident in saying they won't be able to touch this figure with a 39.5-foot pole. Essien 2.0 is an absolutely dynamite figure that has set the bar for the rest of PNSO's 2020/2021 lineup incredibly high. And from what I've seen of the other offerings out right now, Essien might be one of the ones to make a priority for your collection. As always, I want to know what you guys think of this figure. Do you own it yet? Are you planning on picking it up? What Spinosaurus do you think is the best of the best? Drop a comment down below, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for some double trouble. Take care out there, and bye-bye.